Before I begin the actual sermon, I just want to draw to your attention, if I need to, the wonderful contributions to our visuals. And thank you again to Barbara and to Wayne and to Herbie for the wonderful animals that have joined the plants here in our semblance of the created order. We had a little controversy about the presence of the pig, but I'm happy to say that the pig was part of creation, and we welcome that pig into our worship today. If you have any questions about the presence of the pig, Peter will share a dream story with you. Again, we are in the book of Job. Levon Wright Bracey has a story to tell. Dr. Bracey, you see, was the first African-American student to graduate from high school in Gainesville, Florida. That was, of course, a long time ago. It wasn't easy for Levon then, not because of academic challenges that she had, not even because she was something of a defiant boundary crosser. Rather, she suffered because she wanted justice to be done in Florida. Now, as this election season approaches, Dr. Bracey is still motivated to work for justice because, she says, because of the suffering that she endured during those culture-changing but horrific years. She's on the front lines, you see, of resisting voter suppression in her home state of Florida. She is again swimming upstream against an unjust, draconian voter registration law. How easy it would have been for her to give up. In 1967 at Gainesville High School, and now. How easy and really understandable it would have been for her to heed the cautions of those who said, "But Levon, God created different races in order to define separation." How easy it would have been for her to give in to despair when she experienced mistreatment. How easy it would have been to curse God who allowed it all. Few would have blamed her if she had just simply chosen to go in the opposite direction, to avoid the oppressors altogether, to opt out of the processes and privileges of citizenship in this country and in Florida. Rather, Levon stands with determination. She stands convinced that God is on her side as she works to see justice done. She says this: "I would never have had the courage or the insight, the determination or the compassion that I have now without experiencing unjust suffering and abuse." And so every day, she's pounding the pavement, registering Florida voters. She's calling public meetings to let their nasty little secret out, that some are trying to keep others from participating in the democratic process. She's actively resisting targeted voter registration restrictions that would purge registered voters, just in case they're not citizens. Their last names give some clues. Unfortunately for now, injustice prevails. And given the political extremism of these days, it's predictable that injustice prevails in the name of God. Today we rejoin the archetypal Job as he finds himself on the verge of giving up with the injustice that he's experiencing, the unjust suffering He's finally at the end of his rope. He can't take this suffering that he doesn't deserve any longer. While Job is convinced that everything will be okay if only he can locate God and get this matter straightened out. But he can't find God in order to bring divine justice, to affirm his righteousness, and therefore assuage his pain. Job is weary. He's weary from unrelenting suffering. He's weary of maintaining his innocence to his betraying friends and family who are convinced that he must have done something. Job is at the end of his tether, ready to quit. His very best answers and remedies have failed. There's no place else to go. He's hopeless, raw, vulnerable. All he wants now is an honest answer from God. He's ready even for a different perspective, ready to a new way, to be open to a new way of seeing things. Anything. He's ready. This is the point where God finally does show up. But God doesn't show up as Job imagines. God isn't ready to say, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. God speaks in a way that shocks Job. God neither repents for bringing suffering on Job, nor rules in Job's favor. Rather, when God speaks, you heard the message, when God speaks, the message is basically, you, Job, aren't God, now are you? You aren't even the center of the universe as you know it. Roy is. Well, dang. We all think it somehow, don't we, Roy? That the world, or at least our little part in it, actually does revolve around us. Our justice, our needs, our points of view. After all, the book isn't entitled Job and Job's Friends. It's not even entitled Job and God Duke It Out. The title of the book is simply Job. Consumed by his own suffering, the worst, of course, that anyone has ever known, and totally undeserved. Of course, Job is self-focused. I think most of us know that pain can do that, can't it? It can focus us on our own need for healing, our own need for what is right in our lives. We can hear him and perhaps ourselves now. I just can't take it anymore. Job, again, perhaps like us, assumes that he sees things clearly, that his views about his life, his theology, his pain are fact. The only way to see them, the only way to see the world. But it's revelation time, it's turn the page time when God shows up, ready to take on those rules that Job wants to hold God to. What are those rules, Job? Whose rules are they? Where did they come from? Do you know the rules? Really? God seems to say. Where were you when it all came to be? When I set planets in motion, do you know how to make it rain? Can you give birth to ice caps or find prey for the lion cubs? Well, the answer is obvious. Job wasn't anywhere when it all came to be. He wasn't even a glimmer in his mother's eye. God seems to say that creation, the world, human history, present lives cannot be understood in accordance with the rules that Job has in mind, the principles of moral cause and effect. Look, Job, look at creation. That isn't how it works. Rather, natural processes that do cause suffering in the world are not to be equated with moral consequence. Who do you think you are, Job? You aren't God. You're human. Writer Thomas More, best known, I think, for his wonderful book entitled Care of the Soul, describes a friend's introduction of him when Tom was invited to give a lecture. His friend got up and said, "I'm going to tell you what Tom isn't. He isn't an artist. He isn't a scholar. He isn't a philosopher. He isn't." Tom interrupts him here in his book and says, "I felt somewhat mortified hearing all these things that I wasn't." My friend's unusual introduction of me was, however, wise and absolutely correct. Maybe we could all use an emptying out now and then. Considering who we are not, we may find the surprising revelation of who we are. We all need to be reminded of who we are not, so that we can discover or remember just who it is that we are. So who, in relation to God, did Job think he was? And if we are the Job character in the story, who do we think we are? Clearly, we are not God. Now, progressive people of faith often speak of God's presence that is actually in us. We can know God, we contend, rightly I believe. We can know God in our encounters with each other. And we can find God within, present and alive, living in our own souls. But Job and Genesis and many other portions of Scripture remind us that this is not the whole truth. It's the truth, but it's not the whole truth. We are not God. We don't see with divine, eternal, or cosmic perspective, much less from a place of moral perfection. God shows Job the cosmos, all creation in its vastness, from a creator's point of view, saying to Job, "You haven't seen anything compared to the vastness and the small detail of it all. And what you have seen, you see it only through your own eyes. Let me show you, Job, another perspective. The vastness of time and space, the variety of life, the wildness of it all, in its suffering and hope." God showed Job a world that includes forces of chaos and functions of freedom. A freedom, as we know, that can bring injustice, pain, and even cruelty. God points out phenomena and species, each with their own worth and power, a timeless world of wild interaction that comprises the fabric of creation. God gives Job a wider view, a larger context. And suddenly, Job gets a glimpse of life beyond his own determinations of right and wrong, just and unjust. He's moved by God's revelation. He's moved to take an honest look at his plight and at God's position in it all. Perhaps God was saying, "How dare you, Job, entertain the notion that I don't care? Do you know how much I love this tumultuous, magnificent universe? Can you see the wild ways of all creation, the life, the death, the beauty and pain of it all? Can you even imagine how ostriches survive or how mountains erupt in the belly of the ocean? And even when you have diminutive notions of me, when you think that I judge or choose to punish, I remember that you are a part of the glory of it all. God's rhetorical questions are overwhelming, but perhaps they don't indict Job as the faithless one in the way we might assume. I want you to know, God may be saying, that rather than fixing things, rather than curing all your suffering, I created you for freedom and promised to be with you through it all. Who do you think you are? Who do we think we are? We are a part of the vast, beautiful, wild creation. But that doesn't exactly give an answer to Job's question about suffering, or ours perhaps, does it? Or might it? God has created in diversity and wonder, in wildness and willfulness, and has imbued human beings with autonomy, with freedom. We are not objects of God's manipulation. What Job saw as God's indifference, cruelty, capriciousness is a part of the character of all that is. God doesn't manipulate or exert power over. Rather, all creation is unpredictable and doesn't exist simply for human benefit. God's creation includes light and shadow, life and death, beneficence and pain. Who do we think we are? We are human, part of this vast, evolving, interactive creation, created with conscience, autonomy, wisdom, with the capacity to deal with moral ambiguity. We humans can choose. We can comprehend meaning in it all. We can gain wisdom from suffering as well as from blessing. We can become, through pain, more compassionate and loving. Who do we think we are? We are Job, the ones to whom God responds and invites into relationship, to share in the hope-giving and compassion, the love and salvation, to join God in countering hopelessness and alienation, to join God in love of and care for the world, and to love its Creator. Truth is revealed to us. The truth that suffering is never about being punished, but is part of creation. And that in it, God is with us, ready to offer us insight and wisdom, to sustain hope, and to partner with us through the compassion of our own suffering, to partner with us in relieving the troubles of the world. Who do we think we are? We are partners with God, complementary, mutually present in the world, in relationship for and with each other. With God, we participate in finding and creating meaning, and in bringing the world hope. We experience life, including its injustices and pain, to rise above and plunge beneath. We are created with the capacity to soar to heights of wonder and to plunge the depths of life's meanings. If we, like so many, cling to God the judge, or reach out for God the magic rescuer, we remain impotent. We also let ourselves off the hook of our divinely given role to be healers, justice bringers, hope sustainers, and stewards of God's creation. So now that Job's perspective has been broadened, now that the old God view, God the judge who doles out punishments and rewards, now that God has deconstructed that for Job, now that his questions about blame and justice have been pegged as self-focus and thereby limited, Job has some decisions to make. Can he pick himself up? Can he be part of creation and live? Even though he's pretty clear that being good, even being godly, won't protect him from pain and loss. Even though he'll be proceeding into this new way of living without formulas for life or God or consequences, can he make a life? Can he love and hope and seek and worship with this new image of God and this new understanding of just who he isn't and is? And what about us? Can we make a life without blaming, without assurance of reward for our goodness? Can we make a good and meaningful life without a sign that those who do harm, who cause harm, will get what they deserve? Can we make a life without a sense of our supremacy over others based on anything? What sort of life are we ready to make? What sort of relationship with this God of the cosmos are we ready to build? And our stewardship question for today: what kind of stewards are we of God's creation, of God's good gifts, and of our liberating and healing notions of God that can supplant those that are destructive and bring not life to so many in the world? I hope today that we can rekindle our wonder in the wild mysteries of God, that we can release ourselves from the need to judge or blame others, or blame ourselves for that matter, that we can let go of the magic God, the one who doles out rewards and punishments. And I hope that we can do these things so that we can live freely. And like Levon Bracey, our friend down in Florida, that we can take what we know from our own suffering, that we can rise above it, to join with God, to bring hope and justice to our world. May it be so. Amen.